My name is Jeanette Williams, and at 72, I never imagined I would start over. For 30 years, that mansion on Oak Ridge Drive was more than brick and mortar. It was my sanctuary, my legacy for my son Thomas. Then, Catherine moved in after their wedding. 3 years of subtle changes became something more sinister. The day she wrinkled her nose and told her friend, "Her room stinks," while looking directly at me, something inside me finally broke. Are you watching this from your own family home? Like and subscribe if you understand what comes next. I built my publishing company Willow Press from nothing but determination and a small loan from my father in the 1970s. As a woman in business back then, every achievement came with twice the effort. When my husband Robert died suddenly of a heart attack at 45, I was devastated but determined not to crumble. Thomas was only 12, and he needed stability more than ever. The life insurance policy and our savings gave me options, and 6 months after Robert passed, I found the mansion on Oak Ridge Drive. It was in disrepair, but had incredible bones and character. The real estate agent warned me it would be a money pit, but I saw beyond the peeling wallpaper and creaky floors. I saw our future. "This is it, Tommy," I told my son as we stood in what would become the grand foyer. "This is where we start again." Thomas grew up in that house, running through its halls, doing homework at the kitchen island I had custom built, and eventually bringing home his first girlfriend to meet me. I raised him alone, attending every baseball game and school function. We were a team. Each year, I invested in restoring another part of the house. First the roof and electrical system for safety, then the kitchen with its stunning walnut cabinets and marble countertops. The library became my personal project. With floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, I stained myself over one particularly memorable summer. By the time Thomas went to college, the mansion had become the crown jewel of the neighborhood. I hosted the annual garden club luncheon and Christmas parties that people talked about for months afterward. The community knew me as the woman who brought that grand old house back to life. Thomas thrived at university studying business and finance. I paid his tuition without a second thought. Education is an investment, I always told him, the kind no one can ever take from you. When he graduated with honors, my heart swelled with pride as he crossed that stage. He landed a position at an investment firm right after graduation, and his career took off like a rocket. By 33, he was a senior portfolio manager with a corner office and a team working under him. I never failed to remind him how proud his father would have been. It was at a corporate charity gala that Thomas met Catherine. He called me the very next day, sounding like an excited teenager rather than a successful businessman. "Mom, I met someone special," he said. I hadn't heard that tone in his voice since he got his first car. Catherine was striking with copper hair and a polished presence. When Thomas brought her to Sunday dinner, I noticed how she admired the crystal chandelier in the dining room. "This is exquisite," she said, and I felt a moment of connection. Someone who appreciated beautiful things might understand what this house meant to me. Their courtship moved quickly. Within 8 months, Thomas proposed with his grandmother's ring that I had preserved for this exact moment. I was touched when Catherine cried upon hearing the ring's history. The wedding planning became my joy. I offered to host the rehearsal dinner at the mansion and happily wrote checks for the venue, the flowers, the band. When Catherine worried about the cost, I assured her I'd been saving for Tommy's wedding day since he was born. Their wedding day was perfect. The weather cooperated. Catherine looked radiant, and Thomas couldn't stop smiling. During my speech at the reception, I welcomed Catherine to our family with genuine warmth. "Today, I don't lose a son," I told the guests, "I gain a daughter." After the honeymoon reality set in, the housing market in our city had skyrocketed, and despite their combined incomes, Thomas and Catherine struggled to find a home that met their expectations. I watched them grow frustrated with each property they viewed. One Sunday dinner after Catherine sighed over another failed house hunting weekend, I made the offer. The East Wing has the bedroom suite with the private bathroom, plus the adjoining sitting room. It would give you privacy, but still allow us to share family meals and holidays. You could save for your dream home without rushing. Their faces lit up. "Are you sure?" Mom Thomas asked. "Absolutely," I answered. This house has always been meant for family. Catherine hugged me tightly. You're an angel, Jeanette. We promise it won't be for too long. I spent the next week preparing the east wing, replacing the mattress with a new one, buying fresh linens, and making sure the closets were empty for their belongings. I imagined family breakfasts and movie nights, 3 generations someday, filling the rooms with laughter. The future looked bright as I welcomed them home with open arms. The first week was everything I had hoped for. We ate dinner together each night, sharing stories and laughing. Catherine complimented my cooking and asked for recipes. Thomas seemed relaxed, happier than he had been in months. Then came the subtle shifts. Catherine ran her finger along the mantelpiece and mentioned casually, "This dark wood makes everything seem so dated." The comment stung, but I smiled and noted her preference for lighter colors. The following weekend, I prepared my special pot roast, a recipe passed down from my grandmother. It had always been Thomas's favorite meal. As we sat down to eat, Catherine took a bite and said, "This is interesting, but have you ever tried using less salt? My mother makes it with rosemary instead of thyme." I glanced at Thomas, expecting him to jump in with his usual enthusiasm for the dish, but he just nodded. "Catherine's mom is an amazing cook," he added. Something in my chest tightened. Within a month, Catherine had begun rearranging furniture when I was out. I came home one day to find the antique side table that had been in the entryway for 20 years now, pushed into a corner of the living room, replaced by a sleek, modern console table I had never seen before. "We picked it up this weekend," Thomas explained when I asked. Catherine thought it would brighten up the space. I wanted to point out that it was my house, my entryway, but the words caught in my throat. Thomas looked so pleased with the change that I swallowed my objection. The changes accelerated. The floral curtains in the living room disappeared, replaced with minimalist blinds. The comfortable cushions on the window seat were swapped for angular ones in a gray fabric that matched nothing else in the room. When I mentioned to Thomas that I missed the curtains that had framed our garden view for years, he sighed. "Mom, those curtains were from the 90s. Catherine has a great eye for design. The house looks more current now." Catherine began inviting her friends over for coffee. I would walk into my kitchen to find 3 or 4 women sitting around the island conversations, stopping abruptly when I entered. Once I overheard one of them say, "God, my mother would never let me change a thing in her house," followed by Catherine's laugh, and a comment too low for me to catch. Thomas started working later hours. Our family dinners dwindled from every night to twice a week then, to just Sunday evenings. When he was home, he was often on his phone or laptop, half listening to conversations. One evening, I was watching a documentary in the living room when Catherine came in and asked, "Would you mind turning that down?" The volume carries and I'm trying to have a phone conversation. The TV was barely audible to begin with. The incident in the kitchen broke my heart. I came downstairs one morning to find Catherine reorganizing my cabinets. My grandmother's hand-painted serving bowl, always kept in the glass front cabinet where I could see it daily, was boxed up under the sink. "What are you doing?" I asked, unable to keep the distress from my voice. "Just creating some order," Catherine replied without looking up. "You have so many things you never use taking up prime cabinet space." That afternoon I tried to talk to Thomas about setting some boundaries. "I don't mind updates to the house," I said carefully, "but some things have sentimental value to me." Thomas barely looked up from his phone. "Mom, you're being sensitive. Catherine just has modern tastes. The house looks great." That night I moved the serving bowl to my bedroom for safekeeping. I found myself retreating to my suite more often, a prisoner in my own home. I added a small refrigerator, an electric kettle, making excuses about midnight snacks. But truthfully, I wanted to avoid the kitchen where I no longer felt welcome. The first holiday season hit me hardest. For 29 years, I had decorated the mansion with garlands on the banisters and the 12-foot tree in the foyer, ornaments collected over decades, telling our family's story. That year, Catherine announced she had hired a decorator for a cohesive holiday aesthetic. I came home from a doctor's appointment to find strangers dismantling my carefully labeled ornament collection, replacing handmade treasures with matching gold and silver balls. "Where are the ornaments Thomas made in school?" I asked, panic rising. "In storage," Catherine said breezily. "The theme this year is Winter Wonderland, not grade school projects. I found Thomas in his office and fought back tears as I explained why those ornaments mattered. He promised to look for them but never did. On Christmas morning, I gazed at the magazine Perfect Tree, feeling like a guest rather than the heart of the household. On the 1-year anniversary of Thomas and Catherine moving in, I realized the tension had become our new normal. The mansion had transformed around me. Rooms once filled with warm colors and comfortable furniture now featured stark whites and angular pieces that looked better than they felt. Catherine had taken over the management of all common spaces. My gardening books disappeared from the sunroom shelf, replaced with architectural digests. The reading nook, where I had spent countless evenings, now housed Catherine's yoga equipment. The dinner parties were the hardest to bear. Catherine would host elaborate gatherings for Thomas's colleagues or her friends, planning menus and decorations without consulting me. Several times I only learned about these events when caterers arrived at the door. The first time I walked into my own dining room to find 12 strangers seated around my table, Catherine looked up with surprise. "Oh, Jeanette, I thought you were resting. We're just having a small dinner for the charity committee." When I attempted to join the conversation, I quickly realized no one was interested in including me. After 10 minutes of awkward attempts, I excused myself, retreating once again to my rooms. The passive-aggressive notes began appearing. A post-it on the laundry room door, "Please wipe down machines after use." Another on the refrigerator, "Let's try to keep leftovers for no more than 2 days." Each written in Catherine's precise handwriting, each implied I was the one creating problems. One Saturday morning, I overheard Thomas and Catherine talking in the kitchen as if I weren't in the adjacent room. "Your mother left her gardening shoes by the back door again," Catherine said. "I'll talk to her," Thomas replied with a sigh that pierced my heart. When had I become a burden to my own son? The family photos were the breaking point of that period. For decades, the main hallway had displayed our family history. Photos of Thomas growing up, Robert and me, on our wedding day, family vacations, and milestone celebrations. I returned from a dental appointment to find the hallway transformed. The family photos had been replaced with abstract artwork in black frames, my history, my memories erased with no warning. "Where are the family photos?" I asked, Catherine, my voice shaking. "I moved them to the upstairs hallway," she replied, without looking up from her laptop. "This is the main entrance to the house. It needed a more sophisticated look." I climbed the stairs to find the precious photos crammed together on a small wall near the linen closet. Many, now missing, like the photo of Thomas and Robert fishing when Thomas was 10. The garden redesign happened without a single word to me. I had cultivated that garden for decades, knowing each plant's story and season. The rose bushes Robert had given me for our anniversary, the hydrangeas from my mother's garden, the special corner where Thomas and I had planted a tree when he graduated high school. I came home from lunch with my friend Barbara to find landscapers digging up my beloved plants. In their place, they were installing sculptural grasses and minimalist stone features. "What is happening here?" I asked one of the workers. "Mrs. Williams approved the new design last week," he replied, clearly confused. "I am Mrs. Williams," I said quietly. "Oh, I meant the younger Mrs. Williams," he clarified with an apologetic smile. I found Catherine in the kitchen reviewing fabric samples. "How could you do this without talking to me first?" I asked, fighting to keep my voice steady. She looked surprised by my distress. The garden was so outdated, Jeanette. All those different colors and plants everywhere. The new design is much cleaner and requires less maintenance. "Those plants had meaning to me," I said. "We saved some of them," she replied dismissively. "The ones that worked with the new aesthetic." The comment about elderly people smells came during a casual lunch Catherine was having with 2 friends. I was passing through to get a book from the library when I heard her voice. "We had to replace all the carpets in the east wing when we moved in," she was saying. "You know how older homes get that smell, especially when elderly people have lived there a long time." The laughter that followed froze me in place. I reversed direction and left silently, humiliation burning in my chest. Barbara noticed the change in me during our weekly lunch. "Jeanette, you don't seem yourself lately," she said, reaching across the table to touch my hand. What's going on in that house? I broke down then, the tears I had been holding back for months, finally escaping. I told her everything, the reorganizing, the exclusion, the comments. I feel like a ghost in my own home, I admitted. Have you talked to Thomas? She asked. He gets defensive immediately, I explained. Says I'm being too sensitive or resistant to change. When I tried again to speak to Thomas about how isolated I felt, his response crushed whatever hope I had left. Mom, you need to be more flexible. Catherine has given up a lot to live here. She could have insisted on our own place. This was supposed to be temporary, I reminded him. Until you found your own home. The housing market is still crazy, he said impatiently. And Catherine has put so much work into making this place nice. The cancelled family vacation was the final disappointment of that year. For 15 years, Thomas and I had taken a week each summer to visit the coast. It was our special time together, a tradition that continued even after he started his career. 2 weeks before our scheduled trip, Thomas called to cancel. Catherine and I are looking at houses that week, he explained. Really promising properties. We booked this 6 months ago, I said, unable to hide my disappointment. I know, Mom, but this is important. We can go to the beach anytime. But we never did. And I later discovered through social media that they had actually taken a trip to wine country with Catherine's parents that week instead. The suggestion about the retirement community came during what was supposed to be a nice family dinner. Catherine mentioned her aunt had moved into a senior living facility. She loves it there, Catherine said, looking directly at me. No maintenance worries, activities, everyday people her own age. You might be happier in a place like that, Jeanette. I looked at Thomas hoping for some defense, but he just gave me a weak smile. They have really nice ones close by, Mom. We could still see you all the time. I excused myself early that night and lay awake until dawn, wondering how I had become an unwelcome guest in the home I had rebuilt with my own hands. Catherine decided to host a summer garden party to show off the newly redesigned outdoor space. Invitations went out to 50 people, a mix of Thomas's business associates, Catherine's friends, and neighbors. When I offered to help with the planning or preparation, Catherine smiled tightly. No need, Jeanette. I have it under control. Just enjoy yourself as a guest. A guest. In my own home. I nodded and withdrew, understanding my place in the new hierarchy. The day of the party dawned sunny and warm. I spent extra time getting ready, choosing a blue dress that had always garnered compliments and styling my hair carefully. As I looked in the mirror, I saw a woman trying too hard to belong somewhere she once owned completely. By 2 in the afternoon, the garden was filled with people holding champagne flutes and small plates of catered appetizers. I made my way through the crowd, smiling and nodding, but feeling increasingly invisible. "Hello, Mrs. Williams," said one of Thomas's colleagues, before quickly adding, "Senior, I mean," when he spotted Catherine across the lawn. Catherine's friends offered perfunctory greetings when our paths crossed. "So nice you could join us," said one woman, as if I had dropped by unexpectedly rather than lived there. I tried joining a conversation about local restaurants, but found myself increasingly edged out of the circle until I was standing slightly behind everyone else, no longer part of the group. No one noticed when I stepped away. The catering staff treated me with more warmth than the guests did. One young server made sure I always had a fresh drink and checked if I needed anything. "The garden is beautiful," she said kindly. "You must be so proud of your home." I couldn't bring myself to explain that this sterile landscape was nothing like the garden I had lovingly tended for decades. Midway through the party, I overheard Catherine offering to show a group of her friends through the house. "We've made so many updates since we moved in," she said proudly. The place was stuck in a serious time warp. I followed at a distance, as Catherine led 5 women through the main floor, describing each change as an improvement rather than an erasure. This was all dark paneling before she said in the living room, "So depressing." The tour continued upstairs. "And this is our home," Catherine said, emphasizing the "our" as she showed off the master bedroom that had once belonged to me before I moved to the smaller suite down the hall. As they moved toward my current quarters, I heard Catherine say to her friend Lisa, "And this is Jeanette's room. We try not to come down this hall much." "Why not?" asked Lisa. Catherine lowered her voice, but not enough. As they passed my partially open door, she wrinkled her nose and said clearly, "Her room stinks. You know how old people get." Lisa laughed uncomfortably, then glanced back and saw me standing in the hallway. Her eyes widened in recognition that I had heard everything. What made it worse was that Thomas was coming up the stairs at that exact moment. He had heard Catherine's comment too. Our eyes met over the heads of the tour group. I waited for him to say something to defend me or correct his wife. Instead, he looked away and called out, "Kath, Mom, the caterers need to know about serving the cake." That moment crystallized everything. My son had heard his wife insult me in my own home and chosen to act as if nothing had happened. I maintained my composure through the rest of the party, smiling and making small talk when necessary. No one would see how deeply I had been wounded. I had always prided myself on dignity, and I wouldn't abandon it now. That night, after all the guests had gone, and Thomas and Catherine had retired to their wing, I sat alone in my suite. The room that supposedly stank, though I kept it immaculately clean. The room that had become my entire world in this house that no longer welcomed me. I couldn't sleep. Each time I closed my eyes, I heard Catherine's words again, saw the smirk on her face, the uncomfortable laugh of her friend, and worst of all, the averted gaze of my son. At 3 a.m, I made a decision. I would not live where I was not wanted. I would not be the old woman whose room stank the inconvenience they worked around the relic they hoped would remove herself. If they wanted the mansion so badly, they could have it. But it would be on my terms, not theirs. I had rebuilt my life once after losing Robert. I could do it again. As dawn broke, a strange calm settled over me. For the first time in months, I felt something other than hurt and confusion. I felt resolve. I began my research that very day. First, I needed to understand the current real estate market. The mansion had appreciated significantly since I purchased it, especially after all my renovations and updates. According to recent sales in the neighborhood, it could sell for nearly 4 times what I had paid for it 30 years ago. Next, I researched my legal position. The house was entirely in my name. Thomas had no ownership claim despite living there. I made an appointment with Jennifer Wilson, an attorney I had worked with for my publishing business, making sure to schedule it during Thomas's workday. "You're completely within your rights to sell," Jennifer confirmed after I explained the situation. "As the sole owner, you don't need anyone's permission. And the proceeds would be entirely mine to dispose of as I wish I asked." "Absolutely," she said, then paused. "Jeanette, are you sure about this? Have you tried family counseling?" I smiled sadly. "Jennifer, when someone tells their friends your room stinks, and your own son says nothing, the time for counseling has passed." She nodded in understanding. "Then let's make sure this transaction protects your interests completely." My next step was opening a new bank account at a different bank than the one Thomas and I had always used. I didn't want any chance of him discovering my plans through a chatty bank employee who knew us both. I spent evenings researching communities that might suit my new life. I wanted somewhere vibrant, not a retirement village, where I would be defined solely by my age. A coastal town 3 hours away caught my attention. It had a thriving art scene, good medical facilities, and a beautiful boardwalk for morning walks. Online listings showed several attractive condominiums in my price range, all with elevator access, but not specifically marketed to seniors. One in particular caught my eye, a 2-bedroom unit with ocean views, modern amenities, and within walking distance to shops and restaurants. Barbara came over for coffee one morning, when Thomas and Catherine were both at work. I swore her to secrecy before revealing my plan. "I wish I could say I'm surprised," she said when I finished explaining. "But honestly, I've been worried about you in this situation." "Am I overreacting?" I asked, still second-guessing myself despite my determination. "Absolutely not," Barbara said firmly. "You've been disrespected in your own home. Anyone would reach their breaking point." With Barbara's support, I began the process of documenting my personal possessions. I took photographs of everything that had sentimental or financial value, creating a detailed inventory. The family heirlooms required special attention. Items that had been in Robert's family would go to Thomas regardless of recent events. I was hurt, but not vindictive. The silver tea service from my grandmother, however, would come with me along with the jewelry Robert had given me over the years. I contacted a discreet moving company recommended by Jennifer. The owner, Marcus, understood the sensitive nature of my situation and agreed to be flexible with timing. "We can be ready to move you with 24 hours' notice," he assured me. "Just call when you have the date." The opportunity presented itself sooner than I expected. During dinner one evening, Catherine mentioned they were planning a 2-week trip to Europe. Thomas had a business conference in London, and they would extend it into a vacation in France and Italy. "That sounds wonderful," I said, projecting genuine enthusiasm while my mind raced with possibilities. "When are you thinking of going?" "Next month," Thomas said. "The conference is the first week of August. Then we'll take the second week for ourselves." "You should absolutely go," I encouraged them. "You both work so hard, you deserve a break." Over the next few days, I helped Catherine research hotels in Paris and restaurants in Florence. My enthusiastic participation in their planning removed any suspicion they might have had about my intentions during their absence. Meanwhile, I contacted my old friend Harold Jenkins, now a successful real estate agent. "I need to sell quickly and quietly," I told him, "and I need absolute discretion." Harold had known me for 30 years. He didn't ask many questions about why I was selling the family home without my son's knowledge. "I have several clients looking for exactly this kind of property who can move fast," he said. "Let me arrange for a discreet appraisal." The appraisal confirmed what I had suspected. The mansion was worth a small fortune. Harold brought 3 potential buyers for private viewings when Thomas and Catherine were at work. All 3 made offers within 24 hours. I accepted the highest one from a lovely couple with grown children who appreciated the history and character of the home. They agreed to a quick closing, and most importantly understood my need for privacy until the sale was complete. While these arrangements were in progress, I visited the coastal community and toured several condominiums. The one with the ocean view was even more charming in person, with large windows that filled the space with light and the sound of waves in the distance. "I'll take it," I told the real estate agent that afternoon. With the help of Jennifer, all the legal documents for both transactions were prepared. The timing aligned perfectly. Both closings were scheduled for the first week of August, while Thomas and Catherine would be in London. The hardest part was deciding what to take and what to leave behind. Each object in the mansion held memories. The grandfather clock in the foyer had chimed through birthdays, holidays, and ordinary Tuesdays for 3 decades. The dining table had hosted hundreds of family meals. In the end, I chose items that represented the heart of my life rather than its grandeur. Photo albums, Robert's favorite books, the quilt my mother had made, kitchen tools that had prepared countless family dinners. Pieces of my history that would make any new place feel like home. For Thomas, I carefully selected family photos to leave behind. Despite everything, he was still my son, and I wanted him to have tangible connections to his father and his childhood. As Thomas and Catherine's departure date approached, I finalized my arrangements with Marcus for the moving company. They would arrive the morning after Thomas and Catherine left for Europe. "Are you sure you'll be okay alone for 2 weeks?" Thomas asked the night before their departure, more out of obligation than genuine concern. "I'll be fine," I assured him. "Barbara and I have plans for lunch, and I have my book club. The time will fly by." If only he knew how right I was. The morning Thomas and Catherine left for their trip was surprisingly ordinary. Thomas gave me a quick hug, his mind already on the journey ahead. Catherine offered a perfunctory wave from the doorway, her attention focused on checking her passport and ticket details. "Have a wonderful time," I called as their taxi pulled away. "Don't worry about anything here." I stood in the driveway until the car disappeared around the corner. Then I took a deep breath and turned to face the mansion. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of purpose filling me. Marcus and his team arrived at 8 o'clock the next morning. They were efficient and respectful, carefully wrapping each item I had designated for the move. "These go, those stay," I explained, moving from room to room. I had spent weeks secretly marking everything with small colored stickers hidden from view. Packing my personal treasures brought unexpected emotions. Each object held stories. The crystal vase Robert had given me for our 10th anniversary. The first edition books I had acquired through my publishing connections. The small bronze sculpture Thomas had made in high school art class. "Are you taking this, ma'am?" asked one of the movers, holding up a family photo from Thomas's college graduation. I hesitated, then nodded. "Yes. But please make copies of all the family photos and leave them in that box on the dining room table." The sale of the mansion closed faster than even I had anticipated. The buyers had paid cash, eliminating the need for mortgage approvals and extended processes. 3 days after Thomas and Catherine departed for Europe, I signed the final papers in Jennifer's office. "The funds will be distributed according to your instructions," Jennifer confirmed. 2/3 into your personal account and 1/3 into the trust for Thomas. I had decided to be generous, despite recent events. The trust would prevent Catherine from accessing the money directly, but it would provide for Thomas if he ever needed it. "Are you sure about the division?" Jennifer asked. "You're entitled to keep everything." "He's still my son," I said simply, "and someday he might understand why I had to do this." With the sale complete, I focused on setting up my new home. The condominium was being painted in the warm colors I had chosen, so different from the stark whites Catherine had imposed on the mansion. I had purchased new furniture that would fit the smaller space but still provide comfort and style. Each decision about my new space brought a sense of liberation. No one would question my choices or suggest I was out of touch. No one would rearrange my belongings when I wasn't looking. Every item would be exactly where I wanted it. Every color would reflect my taste. Every chair would be chosen for my comfort. I wrote a detailed letter to Thomas, explaining my decision. I didn't blame or accuse, I simply stated facts. When your wife said my room stank and you said nothing, I realized it was time for me to create a new home where I am respected and valued. I included all the legal documents, showing the fair financial arrangement, the trust I had established for him, and the inventory of items I had taken and left behind. Everything transparent, everything above reproach. On my final day in the mansion, I walked through each room one last time. 30 years of memories lived in these walls. I touched the height markings on the kitchen doorframe that had tracked Thomas's growth. I stood in the garden where only a few of my original plants remained. My neighbor Nancy caught me as I was about to drive away. She had watched the moving trucks come and go with curious eyes. "Spring cleaning?" she asked with raised eyebrows. "New beginnings," I replied. "Nancy, would you do me a favor? When Thomas returns, would you give him this letter? I'd rather he hear the news from me before he finds the empty house." Nancy had witnessed Catherine's gradual takeover and my increasing isolation. She took the envelope without question. "Good for you, Jeanette," she said quietly. "You deserve better." The drive to my new coastal home took 3 hours. With each mile, I felt the weight lifting from my shoulders. By the time I reached the condominium building with its view of the Atlantic Ocean, I felt like a different person. The property manager greeted me warmly and handed over the keys to my new life. "Welcome home, Miss Williams," he said. My new space was modest compared to the mansion, but perfectly suited to my needs. The movers had arranged the furniture according to my instructions, and boxes waited to be unpacked. Through the large windows, I could see the ocean stretching to the horizon, constant and changing all at once. I was hanging a favorite painting when my phone exploded with notifications. Thomas had returned early from Europe and found the empty mansion and Nancy's letter. "What have you done?" His text message screamed in all capital letters. Minutes later, the phone rang. I answered calmly. "Mom, have you lost your mind?" Thomas sounded panicked. "The house is empty, and Nancy gave me some crazy letter saying you sold it. This is a joke, right?" "No, Thomas, it's not a joke. I sold the mansion. All the legal documents are in the envelope I left for you. You can't just sell our family home." His voice rose in disbelief. "It was my home, Thomas. My name on the deed, my money that paid for it, my 30 years of care that made it what it was." My voice remained steady. "I made sure you were taken care of. There's a trust with your name on it." In the background, I could hear Catherine's voice rising hysterically. "What does she mean? She sold it. Where are we supposed to live?" You might want to use some of the trust money as a down payment on a new house, I suggested. The real estate market has excellent options right now. Mom, you need to come back and undo this. Whatever crazy idea got into your head, we can fix it. Thomas was using his problem-solving business voice now. There's nothing to fix, Thomas. I'm exactly where I want to be. When someone says your room stinks and your own son says nothing, it's time to find a new room. The silence that followed told me he remembered that moment at the garden party. That was just Catherine being Catherine, he finally said, his voice smaller. She didn't mean anything by it. Whether she meant it or not, it was the culmination of 3 years of being made to feel unwelcome in my own home. I deserve better, Thomas, and someday I hope you'll understand that. Catherine grabbed the phone, then her composure completely gone. You spiteful old woman. You did this to punish us. Where are we supposed to go? That's not my concern anymore, Catherine, I replied evenly. The new owners will be moving in next week. I suggest you start packing. I ended the call as she launched into another tirade. Then I turned off my phone and walked to the window. The afternoon sun sparkled on the water, and a sense of peace washed over me. For the first time in years, I was answering to no one but myself. The first 3 months in my coastal community brought changes I never expected. Without the constant tension of living with Thomas and Catherine, my persistent headaches disappeared. My blood pressure, which had been creeping upward, stabilized at healthier levels. Even my sleep improved, no longer disrupted by anxiety about what new changes I might discover in my home the next day. I established simple routines that pleased me: morning walks along the boardwalk while watching the sunrise, coffee at a small cafe, where the owner Darlene quickly learned my preference for dark roast with just a splash of cream, afternoons reading on my balcony, listening to the distant sounds of waves and seagulls. At the local bookstore, I noticed a flyer seeking members for a literary discussion group. With some trepidation, I attended the first meeting, surprised to find a diverse group of people ranging from 30 to 80. We discussed Toni Morrison's Song of Solomon with such enthusiasm that 2 hours passed in what felt like minutes. You made excellent points about the symbolism, said the group leader afterward. Would you consider leading next month's discussion? That simple invitation opened a door to a new social circle. Soon I was not only leading monthly book discussions, but helping organize author events at the store. My background in publishing made me a valuable resource, and for the first time in years, I felt truly appreciated for my knowledge and experience. Thomas's anger burned hot for weeks. His messages ranged from accusations of betrayal to attempts at guilt. How could you leave us homeless, and Dad would be so disappointed in you? When these tactics didn't work, he tried financial threats. We'll contest the sale. You weren't of sound mind. Jennifer assured me his threats were empty. The sale was completely legal, and you're clearly of sound mind, she said. He's just lashing out because he's been caught off guard. Catherine refused any direct communication with me. According to Thomas, she felt blindsided and betrayed by a woman she had welcomed into her home. The irony of this statement would have been amusing if it weren't so painful. After 2 months of heated messages, Thomas's anger began to cool into something more reflective. We found an apartment, he texted one day. Smaller than what we're used to, but the location is good. I responded with genuine warmth. I'm glad to hear that, Thomas. I hope it becomes a happy home for you both. He didn't reply, but I sensed a shifting in our relationship. The trust I had established for him remained untouched. Pride, or perhaps Catherine's influence, kept him from accessing the funds that could have eased their transition. My 3rd month in the coastal town, I began volunteering at the community library 2 afternoons a week. I helped with everything from cataloging donations to reading stories to children during the Wednesday afternoon program. You're a natural with the little ones, observed Eleanor, the head librarian, after watching me captivate a group of preschoolers with Where the Wild Things Are. I always wanted grandchildren, I admitted. It hasn't worked out that way yet. The library became another anchor in my new life. They're surrounded by books and curious minds of all ages. I felt useful and connected to the community in ways I had lost in my final years at the mansion. During a Saturday morning community breakfast at the local Grange Hall, I was introduced to Frank Morrison, a retired architect whose wife had passed away 2 years earlier. Frank had kind eyes and an easy laugh. He asked thoughtful questions and actually listened to my answers. "Would you like to walk along the shore after breakfast?" he asked. "The tide pools are fascinating this time of year." That first walk led to coffee the following week, then dinner at a small Italian restaurant where Frank knew the owner by name. What struck me most was how Frank treated me with unfailing respect. He valued my opinions, laughed at my jokes, and never once made me feel that my age diminished my worth. "You seem different," he commented one evening, as we watched the sunset from a bench overlooking the bay. "Lighter somehow than when we first met." I realized he was right. The knot of tension that had lived between my shoulders for years had finally released its grip. I was standing taller, laughing more freely, speaking my mind without fear of criticism. 4 months after my departure from the mansion, Thomas called rather than texted. His voice sounded tired, but calmer than it had been. "I'd like to come see you," he said. "Just me, not Catherine. Would that be okay?" The following Saturday, Thomas arrived at my condominium. He stood awkwardly in the entryway, taking in the warm colors and comfortable furnishings, so different from Catherine's minimalist aesthetic. "This is nice," he said finally. "It suits you." "Thank you," I replied. "Would you like the tour?" I showed him through my new home. The kitchen where I cooked meals I actually enjoyed eating, the guest room always ready for visitors, the office where I had begun writing a memoir about my years in publishing. "You seem happy," he observed, as we sat on the balcony with coffee. "I am," I confirmed, "happier than I've been in years." "I didn't realize how unhappy you were before," Thomas admitted. "Or maybe I didn't want to see it." "It's hard to see what we're not looking for," I said without accusation. We talked for hours that day, really talked in ways we hadn't since before Catherine. Thomas acknowledged how the household dynamics had shifted, though he still defended Catherine's intentions. "She was trying to create our home," he explained. "At the expense of mine," I replied gently. "There could have been room for both our styles, both our needs." He had no answer for that. As he prepared to leave, Thomas hugged me tightly. "I'm sorry, Mom," he whispered. "I should have stood up for you." "Yes," I agreed. "You should have." "Can I visit again?" he asked. "My door is always open to you, Thomas. Just call first." Catherine remained absent from the reconciliation process. According to Thomas, she felt I had overreacted dramatically to a casual comment. In her view, selling the mansion was an act of spite that revealed my true character. I had learned enough about myself to know that her opinion no longer defined my worth. Frank, who had heard the whole story over several dinner conversations, put it best. "Some people need others to feel small so they can feel big," he said. "You've removed yourself from that equation." My volunteer work at the library expanded to include a program helping adults improve their literacy skills. The work brought me joy. I hadn't expected watching people gain confidence with each new book they conquered. Thomas began visiting once a month, sometimes staying overnight in the guest room. Our relationship was healing, finding a new foundation built on mutual respect rather than obligation. He never brought Catherine, and I never asked about her. 1 year after leaving the mansion, I hosted a small dinner party in my condominium. Frank was there, along with friends from the book club and library. Thomas drove down for the occasion, bringing a bottle of wine and a framed photo of Robert I had accidentally left behind. As I looked around the table at these people who valued me exactly as I was, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. Starting over at 72 had been terrifying but necessary. The courage to leave a toxic situation had led me to authentic connection and genuine happiness. Later, as Frank and I walked along the moonlit shore, he asked what I had learned from the experience. "I learned that a home isn't defined by its walls or furnishings," I told him. "It's defined by whether you feel cherished within it." I learned that it's never too late to refuse disrespect even when it comes from those we love most. And I learned that sometimes the greatest gift we can give ourselves is the courage to start anew. He squeezed my hand gently. "Those are expensive lessons but valuable ones." "Worth every penny of that mansion," I agreed with a smile. The ocean stretched before us, vast and full of possibilities, much like the life I had reclaimed for myself. By refusing to accept less than I deserved, I had found more than I ever imagined possible. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision to protect your dignity and peace of mind? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. Sometimes the hardest choices lead to the most beautiful new beginnings. If my journey resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe for more stories of resilience and self-discovery. And remember, it's never too late to create a home where you are truly treasured. Thank you for listening, and may your own path always lead to places where you are valued exactly as you are.